Hello, everyone. This is Call the Doctor, and today I'd like to talk about KeyCloak authentication. And afterwards, we can answer questions about KeyCloak or any other questions you might have. So let me backtrack a bit and talk about just regular authentication with HSDS. So if you have a client and you have a server, and you're sending messages across the public internet, it's probably a good idea to have some kind of verification that the sender is who he says he is. And to that end, when we first launched HSDS, we had what's known as HTML basic authentication. And that works by, actually, I can go here. We had a blog some time ago that described how this works. It's called To Serve and Protect Web Security for HDF5. And how it works is that the client has a username, has a password. This gets munched together to this coded string that gets put into the header of each HTTP request to the server. On the server side, this is decoded, and if that user name appears in the password file, and if the password matches, then they're okay. All right. Some problems with this. Even though this looks like an encrypted string, it's not really. So anyone who can tap in to your internet stream can decode your username and password. And the other issue is that, it's not a big deal if you have just like one or two users for HSDS, but if you have hundreds of users, it can become quite a administrative challenge to deal with this password file, right? You'll constantly be updating it. If you use that change password, that's a problem, and all this stuff. So in those scenarios, a better technique could be use some third-party authentication. One of these is KeyCloak. Another popular one is Azure Active Directory. And there are others people have used. And HSDS is set up to be configurable for these different authentication servers. So here, let me first walk through how this works with the basic authentication. So let me start up HSDS here. Oops. So here you have HSDS going, and it's ready. So if I'm in another terminal, I can do curl HTTP localhost 5101 about. And this HTTP request doesn't have any authentication because I didn't configure the username and password. But this is about the only request that HSDS will respond to without authentication, right? If I tried instead to list the contents of user's folder, it would say, you're not authenticated, please authenticate. So how that works is that typically you'll have this file, hsconfig, in your home directory, and this has a username and a password. And when we do something like hslist or using the h5pyd Python API, every time h5pyd is sending a request to the server, it'll use that username and password, put together that string, and send that as part of the HTTP header. And then HSDS will decode that, say, hey, you're okay, and life is good. You can specify the username and password on the command line for these apps too. So if I say so I can illustrate this. Let me just blow away that hsconfig. And if I do now, I think, okay, no endpoint set. So if I set hslist-endpoint, HTTP, localhost 5101/home. I can see that. I can see that, but I can't see these items in here. I can't, so I know there's this file. It won't show it. Oops. So you can get around that by using, you can specify the username here as, let's see, test user 1 -p test, and it's not happy. Oh, no endpoint again. And that's misspelled. Okay, so uh, so this works, and it's pretty convenient. But like I said, it's going to be a challenge if you have to deal with a large number of users. So enter KeyCloak. So you can see it's keycloak.org. It's open source authentication server, and there's a lot of documentation about it. I'm going here with this Docker quick start. You can run KeyCloak in Docker. You can run it as an app. You can have a hosted KeyCloak that keycloak.org manages for you. There's a lot of different options. For now, I'm just going to do this easy option of running KeyCloak in a Docker container. This is not what you want to do for a production system. For one thing, when that container goes away, you'll lose all your configuration information. So we copy this, and if we go here, I had that. So I'll just run this Docker run and these different arguments, and that will start up my KeyCloak server. So now we have two servers running. There's KeyCloak and there's HSDS, but they don't need to be on the same machine. You could have KeyCloak on any machine that you can reach through the web. All right, so I think that's up. And if we go here, it says log in to the KeyCloak admin console. So let's try going there. And I can kill this. And the very secure admin password is admin. Enter password, yeah. Okay, so welcome to KeyCloak. So now this is KeyCloak on my desktop, and I have the web interface to it. First thing we need to do is create what's called a realm. So there's one realm by master, but typically you want to have your apps running on a different realm. So we will create a new realm. And we'll just call it my realm. Say create. Okay, so now we're in my realm, and we can create a client. So there's these default clients here. I'll create a client called, how about my client? There it is. And my client. Next. So standard flow and direct access grants are good. There's other options if you want to get into those. And valid redirect URLs. These I can never remember. So great user. Let's say create client. Yeah, it's this for the redirect URL. And web, let's see, what's it, web origin? Yeah, web origins. It's just HTTPS www.keycloak.org. Right, save that. So now we have the realm, we have the client. Next thing we need to do is create a user. So I go to users, no users found. Let's create a user. And I'll say the username is jreadey. And my password, my email is this. My first name is John. Last name is Readey. There's a thing called groups where you can get a collection of users and treat them as one, but we won't do that right now. Okay. So save. And last thing I need is create a password. So set password, we will use test and make it non-temporary. Very, very bad practice, but this is just for illustrative purposes. Okay, so now we have a user with a password. They have a nice little tester here. You can go to keycloak.org and test the username you just created. So we're here and we say jreadey and test. That works. We're good. It says, hello, John Readey. So it was able to retrieve my name from the database in the KeyCloak container that I started on my desktop. Okay. Okay, so that's that. Next, we need to configure HSDS. So all the information here is in this document, hsds/docs keycloak setup.md. So in HSDS, we have to tell it that the provider is KeyCloak, what the URL is, this OpenID audience, and claims. So claims are the information that KeyCloak returns when you pass it the username and password. And if we go in here, it's not that. I'm confused. If I look at repos, HSDS admin override, admin config override that YAML. We have these all listed here. So OpenID provider is KeyCloak. The OpenID URL is localhost in my case with my realm. And the OpenID audience is account and OpenID claims. That is not right. Okay, we'll see. Okay, so now we're running with this config. And next, if I copy, we need to, for the client side, we need to have a special .hscfg. And I have one pre-baked here. To HSFG. And if we look at that, we have the HS endpoint, the username, my password. So this has to be matched with what we entered in the KeyCloak. the KeyCloak URI, the KeyCloak client, and the KeyCloak realm. So to see if this works, we can just do hsinfo. And voila. Okay, so we're authenticated by KeyCloak. So when I did hsinfo, H5PyD called the KeyCloak URI with JReadey and test. It got back what's called a Java Web Token, which is a big encrypted string, and that string gets passed to HSDS. HSDS is able to verify the username and password from that. And from then it's authenticated. So one thing to bear in mind is that authenticated doesn't mean authorized. The HSDS authorization is still a separate thing in itself. If I do HSLS home JReadey, we can do, say, hsload tall.h5 to home JReadey. So now we've loaded that. If I do hsls-r home JReadey tall.h5, we see that content. If I do hsackle, the ACL stands for access control list, and that controls who can do what action on this domain. So there's one ACL that JReadey owns and gives him full permission to do anything, to create, to read, to update, to delete, to read the ACL, or to update the ACL. If I do hsackle plus read and plus read ACL, the E, for everyone, I can just say default. And now if I do this hsackle, I have two ACLs. So I have default ACL, which applies to anyone who's not otherwise listed, and a JReadey ACL that applies to the logged in user is JReadey. So the default action, you can read, and you can read the ACL, but you can't modify the content. For example, you can't delete it. If we go back and we switch back our hsconfig to the old one, okay. So now I'm back to test user one. I can see the same thing. Or I can't. Where is it? Right. So because I added that ACL for default, I'm able to read that. But if I try HSRM, it's going to say not allowed because that action is not permitted by the ACL. Okay. One more thing, I noticed there was a bit of regression from the document. You see here in the client configuration, I have this hash and a comment. Somehow that's what's causing trouble if I have the KeyCloak lines added. So I took those out of my client auth. So it looks like that without the comments. Okay, so that was a pretty long-winded. I'm glad everything worked. It's a little complicated, but like I said, if you have to deal with a lot of users and managing passwords and such, it's a big convenience over having to manually tweak configuration file in HSDS. Okay, so with that, maybe first, does anyone have questions about KeyCloak or authentication? And if not, we can answer any more general questions. Okay. Does anyone have any questions at all? Okay, this could have been a bit much for everyone to digest. It's not really that hard. Anyone who does want to try KeyCloak, follow the markdown, and if you have questions, just please you can ask on the HSDS forum, and we'll be happy to help. All right. If there's no questions, I will see you next time.
All right.
Bye bye, everyone.
Okay, everyone. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.